Everyone thinks they know Capricorn. Cold, ambitious, workaholic, someone who sacrifices everything for success and feels nothing along the way. Someone who replaces emotion with strategy, warmth with discipline, and love with work. That's the story people tell about Capricorn. And honestly, I get why. On the surface, it looks true. But what if I told you that everything you believe about this sign is almost entirely wrong? Not just incomplete, wrong. Backwards even. What if the real Capricorn is actually one of the most emotionally complex, deeply sensitive, and quietly desperate for connection signs in the entire zodiac? And almost no one sees that. What if the coldness isn't coldness at all, but a kind of grief? A learned protection? A wall built not out of arrogance, but out of survival? I've spent years studying astrology at a deep level. Not horoscopes. Not the kind of content that just tells you what sign is compatible with what sign. I mean the actual architecture of personality, how the planets shape us, what our wounds look like, how we love and how we hide. And Capricorn, without question, is the most misread, most misunderstood, and most underestimated sign of the entire zodiac. Today, I'm going to show you exactly why. I'm going to take apart every assumption you've ever had about this sign and show you what's actually underneath it. And I promise you this. If you stay until the end, something in how you see Capricorn, or maybe how you see yourself, will have completely shifted. Let's go. Let's start with the version of Capricorn most people know. The one that shows up in every astrology description, in every meme, in every which sign is most likely to list. Serious, controlled, reserved, disciplined, goal-oriented to the point of obsession. Someone who arrives early, stays late, already has a 10-year plan mapped out by age 22 and never, ever, seems to crack under pressure. Someone who looks at chaos and sees a project management problem. Someone who responds to emotional conversations by offering solutions instead of hugs. Someone who, when things fall apart, somehow just keeps going. And yes, all of that is real. I want to be clear about that. That part exists. But here is the key question. The question almost no one asks. Why does Capricorn build that armor in the first place? Because that's exactly what it is. Not a personality. Not a character flaw. Not evidence of emotional unavailability. It's armor. A fortress. A structure built, often in childhood, to protect something incredibly tender underneath. Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. And Saturn is not a warm, fuzzy planet. Saturn is the planet of time, of responsibility, of limits, of consequences, and most of all, of hard-earned lessons. When Saturn rules your sign, you grow up learning one fundamental truth very early in life. Nothing comes without effort. Nothing is given. You have to earn everything. And I want to sit with that for a moment, because this isn't just astrology trivia. This is psychology. When a child internalizes the belief that love, safety, and belonging must be earned, that they are conditional, not given, what do? They build a structure, a wall, a fortress of discipline, competence, and control. Because in their experience, being in control means being safe. Achieving means being lovable. Succeeding means being worthy. Not because they're cold, not because they don't feel, but because they've been hurt or they've watched others be hurt, and they decided very early on that they would never be that vulnerable again. Capricorn doesn't wear a mask to manipulate anyone. Capricorn wears a mask to survive. And there is a profound, enormous difference between those two things. Now, here is where it gets interesting. Here is the part that most astrology content completely glosses over. Inside that controlled, disciplined, fortress-like exterior lives one of the most intensely feeling people you will ever meet in your entire life. I'm serious about this. Capricorn doesn't show emotions easily. We know that. We see that. But that doesn't mean the emotions aren't there. In fact, and this is the thing that changes everything, it's the opposite. Capricorn feels everything. Every slight, every disappointment, every moment of connection, every loss, every fear. Capricorn feels all of it, sometimes with an intensity that would surprise the people who only see the composed exterior. And precisely because they feel so deeply, they've learned to contain it. to filter it, to measure it carefully, to only express what they judge safe to express in that moment, with that person, in that context. Because here's what happens when you've been hurt, when you've learned early that vulnerability is risky. You don't stop feeling. You just stop showing it. And that distinction is everything. Do you know why so many Capricorns seem distant in relationships? Why they go quiet instead of reaching out? Why they pull back just when things start to feel real? It's not because they don't care. It's because caring too much absolutely terrifies them. Vulnerability, for Capricorn, isn't just uncomfortable. It's genuinely dangerous. It means exposing the part of themselves they have spent a lifetime protecting. The soft, uncertain, longing part. The part that wants to be held. The part that wants someone to say, you don't have to have it all figured out right now. And here is something fascinating that astrology reveals. Something that takes this from interesting to profound. Capricorn's opposite sign is Cancer. Cancer, the sign of home, of nourishment, of deep emotional bonds, of unconditional belonging. In astrology, opposite signs don't clash. They complete each other. They represent the two poles of the same axis, which means that at their core, underneath all the discipline and ambition and control, Capricorn deeply craves exactly what they seem to reject: comfort, belonging, emotional safety, the feeling of being loved not for what they've achieved, but for who they simply are. Let me say that again, because it matters. Capricorn longs for the exact thing they've trained themselves to survive without. The workaholic, often running from the terror of not being enough. The ambition, sometimes a desperate attempt to prove to themselves that they have value. The control, a defense mechanism against a world that felt unpredictable and unsafe when they were young. This is the real Capricorn, not a machine, not a strategy. A human being who learned to be strong in the moments they deserve to be fragile, and who is still quietly carrying that weight. This is Capricorn Secrets. And if this video found you, it found you for a reason. Subscribe. Hit that button right now. Because what I'm going to show you in the next videos will change the way you understand not just Capricorn, but yourself. Don't miss it. Because this is exactly what we do here. Deep astrology that goes beyond surface-level descriptions and reaches what really matters, the human experience behind each sign. Subscribe and join this community. You won't regret it. Let's go deeper on Saturn. Because to understand Capricorn fully, you need to understand their ruler, not just as an abstract symbol, but as a lived experience. Saturn is called the Great Malefic in traditional astrology. That sounds terrifying, but it doesn't actually mean evil. What it means is reality, consequence, the thing that demands that you grow up, show up, and take responsibility. Saturn is the planet that says, I don't care about your excuses. I care about your integrity. And people who are strongly ruled by Saturn, Capricorn especially, tend to have one thing in common across all the different backgrounds, cultures, and life circumstances. They grew up fast. Sometimes this is literal. They had a lot of responsibility placed on them at a young age. Maybe they were the oldest child, or they had a parent who was absent or struggling, or they were the emotional anchor in a household that needed one. They learned early that the adults around them weren't always going to hold it together. So they would. Sometimes it's more subtle. A family where affection was conditional, where achievement was praised and vulnerability was dismissed, where love felt like something you had to perform for, not something you were simply given. Or sometimes it's a worldview, an early, bone-deep understanding that the world is not soft, that no one is going to hand you anything, that you have to be prepared, always, because things can fall apart. This creates a personality type that is, from the outside, breathtakingly capable. The person who handles crises like no one else. The one who, when everything is going sideways, becomes a calm, steady, problem-solving presence. The one you can always count on. But underneath that capability is a wound. And the wound sounds like this. If I stop being useful, will I still be loved? That is the Saturn question. And almost every Capricorn, at some level, is living with that question unanswered. The inability to ask for help, because asking for help means admitting you don't have it together, and not having it together feels dangerous. The difficulty receiving, whether it's a compliment, a favor, or love, because receiving means being in someone else's debt, and that feels unsafe. The relentless self-criticism, because internally no achievement ever feels quite good enough, and the bar always resets upward before you've had time to celebrate. This is Saturn's legacy. This is the burden and the gift of being born under this sign. But here's what makes this story so extraordinary, and what makes Capricorn genuinely one of the most remarkable signs in the zodiac. Saturn also rules time, and the gift of time is growth. Capricorn is the sign that literally gets better with age. Not just more successful, more whole. In youth, many Capricorns carry a heaviness that can feel overwhelming, a seriousness, a sense of burden, a pressure that seems disproportionate to their years. But as they move through life, as they accumulate experiences and, ideally, do the inner work, they begin to access something profound. Wisdom. True wisdom. Not just knowledge, not just competence, but the kind of deep, earned understanding that can only come from having walked through hard things. Groundedness. An ability to be present and steady in a way that other people can feel. And, eventually, for those who do the work, a kind of unshakable inner peace. A settling into themselves that is genuinely beautiful to witness. The Capricorn who does their emotional work becomes one of the most solid, trustworthy, and deeply whole people you will ever encounter. They become proof that you can survive hard things and come out not just intact, but luminous. Let's address the thing everyone points to first, the ambition. Yes, Capricorn is ambitious. Genuinely, thoroughly, sometimes exhaustingly ambitious. They care about success, about achievement, about building something real and lasting. This isn't a stereotype. This is often very, very true. But here is the massive thing most people get wrong. Capricorn isn't ambitious because they're materialistic. They're not climbing because they love the status symbols. They're not working 80-hour weeks because they're greedy. Capricorn is ambitious because achievement feels like safety. Let me say that again because it's the whole thing. For Capricorn, success isn't just desirable. It's a survival mechanism. It's proof. Proof that they are capable. Proof that they are worthy. Proof that all of that effort, all of that sacrifice, all of those years of holding it together when they wanted to fall apart, proof that it wasn't for nothing. There is a profound psychological layer here that almost no astrology content ever touches. When a Capricorn climbs, whether it's the corporate ladder, their own business, their art, their craft, whatever their particular mountain is, they're not just chasing a title or a number in a bank account. They're chasing a feeling. The feeling of finally being able to exhale. The feeling of, I made it. I'm okay. I'm enough. And here's the tragedy. And I say this with so much compassion. That feeling is incredibly hard for them to hold on to. Because Saturn always presents a new challenge. Always. A higher bar appears just as they reach the last one. A new test emerges just as they thought they'd passed the previous one. The goalpost keeps moving. And because it's an internal goalpost, driven by a deep, early wound, no external achievement can fully satisfy it. This is why you find so many Capricorns who are, by any external measure, wildly successful, and who still feel privately like they're not quite there yet. Like there's always something more they should be doing, building, proving. This is why the question that so many Capricorns wrestle with somewhere in their 30s or 40s is, when is enough enough? And that question, if they let themselves sit with it, is the beginning of the most important work a Capricorn can do. The healing journey for Capricorn almost always involves, at some point, an unlearning, a fundamental revision of the story they've been operating from since childhood. The story that says, your worth is tied to your output, that you are lovable because of what you produce, what you build, how much you achieve. The new story, the liberating one, says, you are worthy simply because you exist, not because of what you've built, not because of how reliable you are, not because of how rarely you need anything, just because you're here. That is a radical concept for a sign ruled by Saturn. And it is also the most beautiful, most transformative thing that a Capricorn can ever come to believe. Okay. If you're still here, if this is hitting different, and you're actually learning something new about Capricorn today, Give this video a like right now. It genuinely helps the channel and tells me this is the kind of deep content you want more of. Seriously, tap the like button. Let's keep going. This is the part people get most wrong. Wildly, spectacularly wrong. Capricorn in love. People expect Capricorn to be a distant partner. Emotionally unavailable. Someone who is physically present but psychologically somewhere else. In a spreadsheet, in a strategy meeting, running numbers in their head while you're trying to have a meaningful conversation. And sometimes, if they're not yet in touch with their emotional depth, if the Saturn wound is still running the show unchecked, that can look true on the surface. But the reality, the full picture? When Capricorn chooses you, when they truly, deliberately, consciously choose you, they are all in. Completely. Quietly. Profoundly. All in. Here's the thing about how Capricorn approaches love. They don't fall carelessly. They don't crash into someone in a rush of feeling and figure out the rest later. That's not their way. Capricorn observes. They watch how you handle stress. They notice whether you do what you say you'll do. They pay attention to the small moments, the ones you don't think anyone is paying attention to, because they know that's where character actually lives. They assess. Not coldly, not strategically, but carefully. Because they know that loving someone means handing them a piece of your interior life. And they do not take that lightly. They protect their heart the way someone protects the most valuable thing they own. Because for them, that's exactly what it is. But once they decide, once they make that quiet, internal, often private decision that you are worth the risk, they show up in ways that are understated, but profound. They remember the thing you mentioned once, 6 months ago, almost in passing. And they show up with exactly that. Not because they're trying to impress you. Because they were listening. Because you mattered. They are there at 2 a.m. when everything falls apart. Not with grand gestures and big speeches, but with steadiness. With presence. With the specific, quiet competence of someone who knows how to hold things together. They build things with you. Not just emotionally, literally. A future. A home. A shared life. A set of rituals and routines and plans that say, I see us together. I'm investing in this. I'm not going anywhere. Because that's how Capricorn expresses love. Not through words primarily, though they'll find those eventually. Through action. Through showing up consistently. Through the long game. Capricorn loves the way Saturn rules. Slowly, deeply, and for a very long time. The challenge and the invitation is getting past the wall. The wall that exists not because they don't want you close, but because the closer you get, the more terrifying the potential loss becomes. If you love a Capricorn, here is the most important thing I can tell you. Don't push. Don't demand. Don't try to tear down the wall with intensity or ultimatums or declarations designed to force them to respond in kind. The key is consistency. Showing up. Again and again. Without drama. Without agenda. Without needing them to be someone they're not. Making them feel safe. Safe enough to believe that you won't use their vulnerability against them. Safe enough to lower their guard, even just a little. And when they do, when a Capricorn finally lets you see who they actually are underneath all that composure and control and competence, when they drop the mask even briefly, that is one of the most precious, most extraordinary things in the world. Because what you're seeing is not just a person being vulnerable. You're seeing someone break through years, maybe decades, of learned self-protection. Someone choosing, consciously, to trust again. That's not a small thing. That's enormous. And it deserves to be treated with enormous care. I want to close by painting a picture. A portrait of what Capricorn looks like, what they become, when they've done the work. When they've turned toward the Saturn wounds instead of running from them. When they've faced the fear of not being enough, examined where it actually came from, and gently, slowly, begun to dismantle it. When they've learned to ask for help, to receive love without immediately wondering what they owe in return, to let their worth rest on something more stable than their output. What you get on the other side is extraordinary. The evolved Capricorn builds empires. And I'm using that word deliberately because they genuinely have the capacity, without losing their soul, without sacrificing the people who matter most, without waking up one day at the top of the mountain and realizing they climbed it alone. They are ambitious and emotionally available, disciplined and tender, structured and open, capable of holding enormous complexity, both internally and in relationship with others. They become the kind of leader that people actually want to follow. Not out of obligation, not out of fear, not because they demand it, but out of genuine respect, genuine admiration, and often genuine love. Because they lead by example. Because they show what integrity looks like in practice. They become the partner who is both the rock and the warmth. The one who shows up reliably and also knows how to be soft. Who offers stability without rigidity. Who holds space without control. And perhaps most beautifully, they become the person who has climbed the mountain and, instead of staying at the top alone, reaches back down, extends a hand, says, "I know how hard this is. I know what the climb costs. Let me help you." That is the full Capricorn, not the caricature, not the cold, calculating workaholic, but the full, realized, healed human being that this sign, at its best, has the capacity to become. And whether you're a Capricorn yourself, recognizing yourself in some of this, maybe feeling seen in a way you haven't before, or you love a Capricorn and you're finally starting to understand the person behind the armor, or you're just here because you're fascinated by what makes people who they are, I hope that today you see them, and maybe yourself, a little more clearly, a little more completely, a little more gently. That's it for today. If this video reached you, if it gave language to something you felt for a long time but never quite had the words for, share it. Send it to someone who needs to hear this. Post it. Let it find the people it's meant to find. Subscribe if you haven't yet. Turn on notifications. We go this deep every single time, and there's so much more to come. And leave me a comment. I genuinely want to know, are you a Capricorn? Does this resonate? Or do you have someone important in your life who is a Capricorn? And did this change how you see them? I read every comment, every single one. I'd love to hear your story. See you in the next video. Take care of yourself.